And for that, we are going to explore the topic of the conditioned mind-body. What is the conditioned mind-body? Well, let's start with the term mind-body. It means that the mind is the body and the body is the mind. Both mind and body are inextricably linked. What happens to the body is affecting your state of mind, and what's happening in your mind is affecting your state of body. And so if you are having negative thinking, then for sure you are going to manifest negative emotions, negative energy, negative symptoms within the body. If you have negative emotions or physical symptoms within the body, then for sure you are going to manifest negative thoughts. So you have a mind-body where one affects the other. Now, in context of the mind-body, what do I mean by conditioned? I mean that there is a certain state, a quality, a way, a performance, a skill, a working order or disorder that has become a permanent trait of the mind and body, where the conditioned mind-body is habitually and repetitively functioning and behaving in a certain manner, where the mind-body has this predisposition to operate in a certain mode, where this condition is determining, influencing, and controlling the way you think, feel, and express yourself. And there are three main elements to the conditioned mind-body. Those three elements are that you have a learned behavior, you have an unconscious trait, and you have a fixed identity. So let's delve into these three separate elements, starting with learned behavior. What is a learned behavior? Simply put, as the result of your past life experiences, you have learned to do something a certain way. You have learned a knowledge or skill in which to perform, to act, to conduct yourself. And this could be a behavior that you have learned yourself, and this could be a behavior that was taught to you by another. Now, in terms of negative thoughts and emotions, are these learned behaviors? Yes or no? Well, let's think about it. Were you born thinking? Were you born with a wide range of emotions? Were you born thinking and feeling negatively? Of course, the answer is no. Whilst, yes, you were born with the faculties and capacity to think and feel, both your thoughts and emotions are behaviors that you have learned as you have journeyed through your life. From your childhood experiences at home, at school, in your social groups, and then as you embarked on a career, developed close relationships, maybe settled down with someone and maybe started a family of your own, you learned how to think, you learned how to express certain emotions. You also learned how to be in a negative state. During the different stages of your life, there were certain negative experiences and events that took place which have now become these key memories, where you experience some type of psychological or physical hurt, abuse, harm, or trauma. And as a result of these negative experiences and events in the past, you learned how to think and feel negatively. You learned how to react or how to cope in a way that elicits a negative state of being and doing, where this learned behavior has now become a pattern, a default mode, a repeatable skill, a familiar state of being and doing, where you become very good and efficient at thinking and feeling negatively, especially when reminded of and confronted by negative situations today that are similar to those negative experiences and events in the past. Is this making sense? Now let's move on to the second element of a conditioned mind-body, where you have developed unconscious traits. What do I mean by the term unconscious traits? Well, let's begin with defining what human consciousness is. Human consciousness has two aspects. There is the conscious aspect and the unconscious aspect. The conscious aspect of the mind is to be aware of the self, and the unconscious aspect is to be unaware of the self. In other words, we have a dual aspect consciousness. We are always in a simultaneous state of awareness and unawareness. At the same time, we are both awake and asleep to who we are and what we are doing. And now here is the really interesting part. The conscious aspect is around 5% of your power. The unconscious aspect of who you are is around 95% of your power. That means that you are roughly 95% unaware of what's taking place in your physical avatar, unaware of why and how it's taking place. And nature has designed us humans with this power differential for specific reasons. We have the power of conscious awareness in which to focus our attention on decoding and defining reality, so that we can be aware and thoughtful of how we experience reality. Whereas the largest power of unconsciousness is reserved for the important bodily functions that operate autonomously. For example, our heartbeat rests somewhere between 60 to 90 beats per minute. The lungs, they automatically breathe, and blood automatically circulates throughout the body to service the vital organs and systems, thanks to the subtle operations of the unconscious aspect. And for our entire lifespan, the unconscious part of who we are is this amazing powerhouse of life force that keeps the body alive and ticking, even though, for the most part, we are unaware of its processes. Just like you are not aware of your breathing until that is that you place your conscious awareness and focus on your breathing. The same ethos applies to your behavior. You are not fully aware of what you are thinking, saying, and doing until you focus on these aspects of your behavior. This means that unless you focus on and observe your behavior, you are not fully aware of your behavior. And so when you are not consciously observing yourself, you are just the unconscious passenger of your actions. And it's the fact that you are unaware of how and why your negative states arise into your being, which is why you feel like you don't have the control to stop and change the way you think and feel. And if what I'm saying does not make absolute sense to you just yet, it will begin to make sense as we move through this webinar, because you will notice that I repeat things a lot. I say the same thing but in a slightly different way, and I do this on purpose so that it drills home the information, the points that I'm giving to you. And right now I want you to try a little experiment. This little experiment will show you the difference between the conscious and unconscious aspect of who you are. I want you to now focus on this logo on the right side of the screen that says play to win. Because that's why you're here, right? You're here to play the right mind games to win. So really narrow your focus down onto that logo. Observe and concentrate on reading the words play to win. Now, this would be you engaged with your conscious awareness. You are consciously awake and aware and observing that logo. Now I want you to stay looking at the logo, but now defocus your attention so that you include your periphery vision. And you should notice that the rest of the room that you are in has come into the awareness of your vision, where you are now aware of the logo and the entire room that is within your periphery vision. Now I want you to realize that whenever you are directly focused on a certain aspect of reality with your conscious awareness, at the very same time, you are unconsciously experiencing the periphery vision. You are experiencing roughly 90 to 95% more of reality than the reality that you are focused on and aware of. And the takeaway lesson from that little experiment is this: we become conscious of the unconscious the moment that we focus our attention on it. We become aware of what we were once unaware of the moment we place our attention there. And so if you want to understand why and how you personally experience negative states, then you need to become aware of those unconscious aspects of your psychology. So this begs the question: why does the majority of your psychology operate unconsciously and beyond your awareness? Well, the unconscious aspect of the mind body is the internal storage house for all of our life experiences. All of those important and useful life experiences that we learned and remembered for our survival, productivity, and navigation, they are stored within the unconscious aspect of the mind body so that we can remember to avoid or repeat those experiences at a later date. These life experiences have become internalized, memorized, and embodied within the psychoneurological fabric of the mind body. And the main purpose of this intelligent design is so that all of that information, all of those past life experiences that we have learned, they can be filed away in the back of our mind. Otherwise, if we had access to everything that we know in every single second and moment of the day, it would drive us around the absolute bend. The information would be so overwhelming that it would drive us stir crazy. We would be so overloaded with thoughts and emotions that we would not be able to function. So instead, everything about who we are and what we have learned throughout our lifetime is stored in the unconscious aspect beyond our immediate awareness, where we can quickly access learned knowledge and skills in the moment as and when we need it. Also, that which is stored in the unconscious is how we develop repetitive, efficient, and effective behaviors. What is learned and stored within the unconscious aspect of self becomes our habitual traits. Habitual traits are behaviors that we consistently repeat. These habitual traits are patterns of behavior that are encoded or conditioned within the mind body so that we have both a mind memory and muscle memory. Now I want you to please pay attention to what I am about to say now. The conditioned mind body is where you have habitual traits that are unconscious. You have unconscious traits, where by memory you automatically repeat certain behaviors and you do so without second thought, without reflection, without constraint, and without the awareness that you do. That's because your unconscious traits are on autopilot mode. You think and feel autonomously, involuntarily, reflexively, and reactively, where your unconscious traits have roughly 95% dominance and control over your behavior. In simpler words, when you are expressing an unconscious trait, you have no recognition and no control over what you do. And because your unconscious traits are repetitive, on average, 95% of what you think, feel, say, and do is what you have always thought, felt, said, and done. Now dwell on the significance of that statement for a moment. I said that on average, 95% of what you think, feel, say, and do is what you have always thought, felt, said, and done. This means that for the most part of your life, that you are replaying the recording of your previous life experiences. You are repeating your learned behaviors. You are reliving the same reality as the same self over and over again. You are like a self-automated machine. And where negative states are concerned, you are unconsciously repeating the same negative thoughts and emotions, recycling them throughout the day, the week, the month, the year, the decade, your entire life. And it may be a different day and you might be in a different location, but your conditioned mind-body with its unconscious traits will experience the same bad thoughts, the same bad emotions, the same stress, the same anguish, the same misery, the same patterns of behavior that you can't seem to stop or escape from. Which brings us to the next topic, which is to explore the fixed identity. What is the fixed identity? The fixed identity is a phrase that I use to define the psychology of how we all become fixed upon this identification with self. A fixed identity that has fixed qualities, in that we identify with ourselves as being a certain person with specific values and beliefs, where you have this fixed identity that is limited to the experiences that you identify with, where this fixed identity has a narrow-minded viewpoint and restricted perception, in that you can only see yourself as being this way and not being that way. You have defined who you are and you have defined who you are not. For example, I could say that I am Russell Bishop, I am a psychotherapist, spiritual guide, and a lifestyle strategist, which is true. But does that define who I am? Am I limited to those experiences? The answer is no. Why? Because for me personally, I'm not fixated on those words and terms to define my experience. I am free to become and do whatever I want and whenever I decide. But this is not the case for most people. Most people become so attached to their self-identity to a point that they cannot see themselves as being anyone other than the person, the label, the title, the experience that they have identified with and accepted. And this fixed identity is the result of all of your past experiences combined. You have memorized and learned that affirms you with a sense of self, which affirms you with this identity of being a certain character. And in terms of negative states, you can condition, affirm, and reinforce negative states into the unconscious aspect of your mind body when you repeatedly identify with yourself as being or having this negative experience or trait. So for example, if I continually say I have social anxiety, I have depression, I am lonely, I am stressed, and I keep repeating this over and over, then by identification and repetition, this will become my learned experience that develops into an unconscious trait that is conditioned within my mind body. Is this now making sense to you? Can you now understand the psychology behind how you experience and develop negative states? You see, it is through repetition, when we continually repeat a certain behavior, that it becomes an ingrained trait. And the more that we repeat thoughts, words and actions, it's like we are brainwashing ourselves. We are hypnotizing ourselves into accepting and believing that we are that behavior. And this negative brainwashing takes place when we are outspoken with others through negative self-talk, and when we use our inner voice and thoughts to criticize, doubt, fear and condemn who we are and how we feel. And so once we have become fixated on a condition that we've identified with as being a part of who we are, this becomes a part of the fixed identity, where the fixed part of our identity equals the perception that drives our behavior and produces the outcome. In other words, who you believe you are is the way that you will see and experience reality. And here is where I want to explore deeper with you on how and why a fixed identity comes to be, where we explore the psychological factors of a fixed identity and why unfixing yourself from a specific identity, unfixing yourself from negative labels and narratives, is absolutely crucial in order for you to let go of any negative baggage that you carry around, so that you can experience personal growth and lifestyle development. And so to keep this compact, I will get straight to the points that you really need to know. Here are the 4 points you need to know about a fixed identity. Number 1, we only focus on the parts of reality that correspond with our perception. Okay, so our individual perception is aligned with the guiding values and beliefs of our fixed identity, which means that through our 5 senses, we experience and decode the objective reality out there through the subjective bias of our fixed identity. And the subjective bias of a fixed identity, with its narrow-minded perception, is why we have a world of different people with differing views that live distinguishable lifestyles. For example, the fixed identity and perception of an affluent banker who values extravagance and believes that financial wealth is success will experience reality entirely different to the fixed identity and perception of a down-and-out drug addict who values the next hit and believes there is no hope. And what separates the affluent banker from the drug addict is their fixed identities and the way that they perceive reality. They perceive reality differently from each other because they identify with different guiding values and beliefs, and this means that they focus on and gravitate towards different experiences. It is the values and beliefs of their fixed identity that perceives and achieves. And once you change the values and beliefs of that fixed identity, you change your life. So for example, if the drug addict were to upgrade the values and beliefs of his or her fixed identity, then he or she would perceive a better reality and upgrade their life conditions. Likewise, if through various misfortunes the affluent banker downgraded the values and beliefs of his fixed identity, he could find himself begging for money on the streets. Which also means that if you were to change the values and beliefs that you have associated to the negative states that you identified with, then you would change the way you think and feel about yourself and your life. You would perceive and achieve differently. Number 2, the fixed identity therefore has a psychological scotoma. This means that through the psychological filters of our fixed identity, we actually delete and distort the parts of reality that don't affirm the values and beliefs of our fixed identity. This means that we are blindsided to any positive aspects of reality that conflict with or disprove our negative conditions within. We obfuscate the facts of reality to instead perceive reality as we would prefer it to be. We don't see reality as it is, we see reality as we are. And so, we always manifest a reality that corresponds with our fixed reality. And this is why we can't wait for people or circumstances to change out there in order to start thinking and feeling better. Because the fixed identity of who we are will never focus on, never move towards, never recognize nor appreciate that which is beyond its scope of seeing. In other words, if you want to see change out there, you must first change who you are within. You must change the way you perceive in order to change the way you achieve. The change begins within. Moving on to number 3, the fixed identity is the reason that we can experience cognitive dissonance, where there is outright disagreement with information that conflicts with our values and beliefs. We can also adjust the facts of reality to match our way of thinking, rather than adjust our thinking to match the facts of reality. So again, the fixed identity is blindsided to anything that it cannot perceive. And because your fixed identity of this is who I am and this is who I am not is a mindset that gives you certainty, a sense of security and familiarity. If there is any information or experience that contradicts and conflicts with the values and beliefs that give you self-assuredness, that actually threatens the certainty, security and knowingness of who you believe yourself to be, then you are likely to deny, to defer, to refuse, to obscure, to move away from that new information and experience. And so, without challenging yourself, without breaking out of the limitations of your fixed identity, you remain stuck fast to whatever traits are conditioned within your mind body that are part of the psychology of your fixed identity. Number 4, the fixed identity will always lead to problems, pain, and suffering. That's because when you cling to the limitations of a fixed identity in a rapidly changing world, you will be met with suffering. That's because when you stick to what you've always known, you are unable to align with, adapt to, and prosper within a world that is continually evolving, updating, and upgrading. When clinging to the values and beliefs of your fixed identity, you will remain as you are, with outdated knowledge and skills, which makes you less valuable, less marketable, less effective, and more likely to become redundant in this changing world. And when you are locked into the specific values and beliefs of a fixed identity, you are blindsided and ignorant towards the opportunities and possibilities that lay beyond the finite version of reality that you perceive. When you perhaps lose or become separated from people, possessions, places that your fixed identity has grown so attached to, you will suffer a sense of loss, hurt, grievance, and depression even. And so the fixed identity is what keeps you beholden to the pains of loss and the pains of separation. Now, before we move on, I want to quickly recap this part of the webinar. So far, you have learned that you have a conditioned mind-body that is the result of learned behaviours where you have developed unconscious traits and a fixed identity, where the thoughts and emotions that you experience habitually are a direct result of the past life experiences that have been memorized into the psychofabric of your unconscious aspect, where roughly 95% of who you are is unconscious conditioning. This means that you are mostly unaware of what you do and why you do it. Unaware means that you are not awake to, not aware of certain aspects of who you are and why you do the things you do. This also means, for the most part, that you act on autopilot mode. Instead of being the driver of your mind body, you are the passenger of your mind body. And whatever prominent memories, thoughts, and emotions that are encoded within your mind body, these are the predominant psycho forces that are 95% controlling your experience, where the recorded past has become the predictable present that guarantees the same future, where your negative states have become unconscious traits that guarantees the same fate. Which brings us nicely on to the next segment of this webinar, where together we discuss what it means to have the problematic character.